Hi, Yazan. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you, Fashinnovation,
That's
for
right.
organizing this amazing gathering here with a couple of, fashion and apparel and design heads, right? First off, before I sort of hop into things, because, lots of things have happened and changed. The world of fashion sort of been flipped upside down the
Absolutely.
last 18 months. But before I talk about how good looking us two shaved bald head guys are inside this group chat, I got to add myself.
That's right.
I guess for all those watching and listening, I'm going to tell you about a little bit myself. My name is Arthur Chipman. I am the executive producer for Los Angeles Fashion Week. That's right, LA Fashion Week. There's fashion weeks all around the globe, right? There's New York, there's London, Miami, Seoul, Korea, Cape Town, South Africa, everywhere you go. And it's sort of like painting colors. There's no really right or wrong with it, but most of them have a particular market segment they're very strong in. So, if you swimwear is very strong in Miami, couture is very strong in Paris. London's got lots of edgy, attire. New York is like the contemporary king. It's like, steady as she goes. And LA has really carved out a niche in the last couple of years with streetwear, which is wonderful. Streetwear, that surfboard, skate, and of course the red carpet, which is a bit of a, byproduct of, I guess, all the entertainment and red carpet events that happen all around
Yep.
the entire year. We happen twice a year during Market Week, March and October. About thousands of people come out, have a wonderful time, and we're going about a month away from Fashion Week. But as we speak, the king dad, the granddaddy of them all, New York Fashion Week is happening as we speak. Right, it's happening in New York, which is great, and it's good to be back in person because I sort of start this entire conversation off with the fact that we've all been sort of huddled together and tight knit with our homes and our families and our loved ones, and haven't had an opportunity to sort of go out in there and meet and engage and work with a lot of people. And, even just the general everyday, because people are very habitual in their habits. So just beyond on this call, I think I did, Skype calls once a month, once every week, because most of my meetings, while they're primarily a lot of conference calls, were like, okay, we'll have tons and tons of calls, but it wasn't quite to the degree where I'm having 4 or 5 Zoom calls per day.
Right. They weren't involved.
And it's completely shifted, not just the fashion industry itself, but really the everyday consumer when your grandmother and your mom's calling in a Zoom call, right? Really. And kids are having to stay home. So, this is really, not just the fashion industry, but a byproduct of what's happening around the globe. And this idea of digitization with, so many aspects of our everyday life, right, has completely shifted and changed. And, I guess that a small little bug from a meat market in, I guess, this place in China has sort of shifted literally, the trajectory of like human civilization, which is crazy. Walking around looking like ninjas everywhere you go to Trader Joe's or to Ralph's or some supermarkets to get a couple of groceries, right? So either way, first of all, I always start this thing off. I talked about this a little bit earlier. I'm not an alcoholic, I don't drink, but I've got a wonderful ginger beer here. I like to take a bit of a drink and have a sip, and then I toast to all those people watching around the world. But I like to pass it off to the lovely Mazan right now and learn more about you and your journey, and really just talk about, this beautiful setting that we live in today, and, the future of the industry. So many things are happening for all those beginners, establish, complete 360. I want to know more about, what's really taught about ourselves. And, considering that fashion has really turned upside down, it's like, there's so many things that are now in question, right? And there's a lot of brands and businesses that have thrived and a lot that have fallen and vanished. So first off, let's start about you. Tell me about you, your world. Love to learn more about you.
Awesome. So my name is Yazan Malkosh. I'm founder and CEO of Swatchbook. My background's weird. My background is a BS in microbiology, genetics, and architectural design engineering. Has nothing to do with fashion. Has everything to do with where I am today. I lived in the visualization space. I helped a lot of brands create visualization content, 3D, 2D, combination of everything, AR, VR, but from a content perspective. And a lot of brands started waking up to understanding like, oh, we need to do this ourselves. We need our designers to be a part of that conversation. Slowly but surely transitioned over to creating helpful tools, plugins, until it kind of, I worked for a company, creating 3D software for companies like Tesla, Adidas, Oakley, Mercedes, Honda, and a bunch of others, all in the design space, helping them in their digital transformation. The one thing that I saw continuously coming up is materials. There wasn't really an answer to like, where do I get my materials from? Imagine like being a designer and, you know, wanting to design a wonderful, you know, a dress and saying, well, now I got to go make the fabric. Well, that's not what you don't really need to do that. You need to source the fabric.
Correct.
It was fascinating to see that there wasn't a solution out there that you can go digitally source your materials. And that's how Swatchbook was born.
Wow. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, having to interact, I deal with brands all around the globe. I deal with small brands, big brands, digital brands, you know, and you're right, you know, there's this whole conventions around sourcing. And, you know, some of them take a bit of a step back and say, hey, wait a second, why do we have tens of thousands of people all asking the exact same question without a consistent answer? Why do you think that is?
I honestly don't know. Not coming from that world. I think the fashion space, as innovative and as a cutting edge as the designs can get, I think the process is very traditional. And you called it, you know, habitual, meaning that I kind of flow into it, and I keep doing the same thing over and over. It's working. It wasn't broken, right? It just wasn't magnified. And I think when COVID happened, it didn't necessarily break the process, but it showcased how broken it already was.
Chokehold at a lot of the industry, because I mean,
absolutely.
If you think about a lot of this stuff, you know, the traditional source and avenues that most brands entertain for like sourcing products and materials have been the same for decades, if not hundreds of years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, not only is it the same, but like in all honesty, when we look back at even like material shows and that experience, right?
Yeah.
You talk to a designer or a product developer that goes to a material show and you say, okay, describe what you do in that material show. They're like, hey, I've got 2 to 3 hours. I go, I meet my suppliers, I see what they got, and then I schedule time for them to come by. And I meet a bunch of friends.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really about the materials. It was about connections, about people.
Correct.
You know, the materials will make their way. The suppliers used to be able to visit the brands and come sit down and showcase the materials, and they'd sit with the materials, get the physical touch and feel and all of that. They tried to, during COVID, you know, we've seen a lot of companies, you know, try their hands on virtual shows. It didn't work because it wasn't about the materials. It was about the camaraderie
and the engagement,
the people. Exactly. Yeah. And so what we try to solve is the material aspect. Is the connections need to be there. You want to build up, you know, call them, see them, get a coffee with them. I think that's something that I think everybody's yearning for. As you had kind of mentioned before, what we try to provide is a place where you can go and see materials. And you know, we don't replace touch and feel, but we want to get you as like, you want to be there. You know, I want to see it in video, in photo, in 3D, in 2D. I want to hear the sound of the material. Again, we're trying to get all the senses engaged and not replacing touch and feel, but wanting the user experience to be as close to it as possible. And I think that's something of designers.
I really appreciate that because, you know, even as a producer, like I'm constantly inundated with a lot of the same questions, right? You know, even you'd be surprised how many established, you know, conglomerates, you would assume the assumption is, oh, you're so-and-so, you've got it all figured out. And you realize they don't have it figured out.
No.
And it's weird how like there may be this circle of going, you know, this complete, you know, Ferris wheel of like staff at rotation going in and out there. And the next guy just follows the last guy's formula and format. And they got to go out there and refigure it out. But, you know, so I know we've got a couple of questions that are coming in, but, you know, it's one of those things that you can say that, well, you know, and with the idea of you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but why do you think the industry, before I get in a couple of questions from the audience, why do you feel that the industry has been so reluctant, given the digitization of a lot of things in fashion? Well, you can say for the most part, it's really been only the last decade or two, really. But, you know, let's say that, you know, you are a perfect unicorn to come in and save us all, right? Why is there such a reluctance? Do you think it's more habitual that people are just not used to? They tend to just do word of mouth. Like, why is there such a reluctance to do this? Is it just a lack of information? What do you see as one of the biggest hurdles currently going from, you know, the traditional avenues versus where the industry is going? Because really, one of the first things the pandemic has taught us is basically, listen, guys, it's no longer, you know, just an elective, either get with the times or get dated out. You know what I mean? Like before it was like an optional, oh, well, maybe I'll have a website or an Instagram page or this or that. But it's like, maybe I'll go to this, but you got no more options. If you don't do it, you're no longer part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a, there isn't like a silver bullet of what the answer is. I think it's a complex set of things. I think change is hard. I think it's hard on any industry. I think the other aspect is that, design hasn't been addressed. A lot of the tools that are forced, I will say forced for designers, are not ever built for designers. We're starting to see the first kind of glimpse of tools. I think when we went to apps on phones and we realized, oh my God, like digital is actually not that difficult. If my mom or dad can use Instagram and Facebook and all these, like how come we can't build design tools? And I think that switch from the traditional, pre-2000s, I need a desktop and this thing needs to cost $50,000 and the software is $30,000 and a technician to run it. And a lot of the tools that designers were kind of, I don't want to say forced into, but exposed to, were tools that were made for engineers, tools that CAD
like Adobe
tools.
And CAD programs that were not completely, they were designed for architectural stuff, but it wasn't quite the same as a creative person going into that.
And certainly not fashion, right? Fashion folks are different. You're a different breed. I mean, designers are a different breed, and then fashion designers are like. But
that's a very interesting question because we just say that really. Leading the industry is, of course, a lot of not millennials and Gen Zs and young folks that go all to the fashion institutions and schools globally. So what do you see eventually is this part of this critical mass of saying, okay, they are the ones leading this conversation. We are trying to be a part of that conversation and build out our community. Here's how we envision our next, short-term versus long-term goals of being a catalyst to sort of change that, right? Because really, at the end of the day, here's what happens. Stacey goes to school. Stacey sees that so-and-so is using this. So-and-so says, yeah, you got to use this to go design, but maybe that's not the best solution, right? And it's like teaching an old dog new tricks again. If you're going, you wouldn't go into a fight with a butter knife to a gunfight. The same thing with fashion and design. I mean, user experience. I feel like a lot of the current platforms and software that's available on the market are absolutely just horrid as far as the application uses. People learn it, they make it work. You become this Adobe expert or this CAD expert, but you're not building houses, you're not building homes. Like,
Correct. Yeah.
And there's that unfortunate disconnect where they say, well, I've got to offload this to somebody else. So
that's what happened. And they've had that privilege, right? They've had the privilege of offshooting it to somebody else. But I think, as you said, when COVID happened, we had a lot of brands that were like, look, we know we're going to go digital. It's going to be 2 to 3 years. Once everybody in the team go, they're holding hands. They're like, okay, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Yes, I'm ready. Like, let's go. COVID happened, and you're absolutely right. It turned everything upside down. Cheers. It turned everything upside down, and they're like, holy crap, we should have done this 2 to 3 years ago. And I think, as much as we poo-poo on kind of how fashion designers are so picky about things, once you put them in a spot to innovate, they'll innovate. And once they say, look, we need to change, and they're kind of in that corner, we've seen some amazing work come out of them, and amazing input, and a lot of change really quickly. There is that threshold of pain, and you want to reduce it. You want tools that are low threshold of pain. They're not hard to use. They're also focused on the user process, and I think that's another big thing. Is like, hey, you just use Photoshop to do everything. And certainly they've kind of done the sketching and things. Now we're asking a lot of designers that have been used to just sketching and passing the sketches to a tailor, a seamstress, whatever, to do this. But now we're asking them to relearn how to do patterns in 3D. Relearn how to stitch stuff. Yes, digitally. There's a lot of change on them. Asking another one. A lot of education. The cool thing is that creativity didn't go away. It's still the same. You can't. People thought that when we introduced 3D to the world, photographers will lose their job. Guess what? They didn't. You need to know lighting. You need to know composition. It's the same thing with fashion design. That doesn't mean designers' jobs are going to go. They're just going to become better, more iterative, more sustainable, less wasteful. I don't have to make a physical sample every time I change a stitch.
It's funny. So you talked about sustainability. Okay, because we've got a couple of questions. I want to make sure that we address this as we get an opportunity, because a lot of people are asking, when it comes to digitally sourcing materials, that, what's the biggest hurdle for brands typically to adopt more of a solution, a consistent solution? Because, I think that I'm not sure if it's a case, because it's a lot of the industry is supported by programs, because, once, people learn it in schools, they bring that into the workplace.
Sure.
The private workplace, so it makes it, makes it, mandatory. Oh, you have to know about this, and you have to know, but why do you have to know about that? That's the only thing that they know about. You know what I mean? It's almost like, who actually has a better mousetrap? Right. So that's one of the questions that they're asking about. And they're also asking about, do they have to be a certain size of brand better suited to be able to have a solution such as Swatchbook?
Right. I mean, there isn't any specific, we don't specify the size. Obviously having an enterprise means that you have a bit more control on your suppliers, right? If you're a target, like one of our customers, you're able to go to your suppliers and say, hey, I need you to log on and put your stuff on there so I can source from that. When you're a smaller designer, you don't have that privilege. No. So you have to kind of go with whatever suppliers are there. That being said, that shouldn't stop you. Once you get one material digitized, that means I can now create any colorway I want. I can customize it. I can go search for things that match it. There's a bit more flexibility, because now at least I can show everybody what my intent, my design intent is, which I think is one of the key things to making a product.
No, absolutely. And it's just so interesting, because it's almost like, I think, going back to this idea of reluctance, or not even necessarily reluctance, I think the core of it is really just the education, unfortunately, right? Yeah. So, and obviously it's not going to happen overnight. So what do you see as Swatchbook as? Again, I asked this question a little bit earlier, but I wanted to sort of hammer back on this again, as far as Swatchbook and read the differentiator versus other people, because there's platforms out there, being devil's advocate, there's platforms out there that claim to be a one-stop shop for a lot of back-end stuff. But the problem, what ends up happening is that where they lose, I think, a lot of traditional, interests from clientele, both, private and, in public, is that, it's really the execution, right? So how does Swatchbook find itself differentiating itself versus any other avenue? Is it just the user experience? Like, what have you guys done?
User experience is number one. I can't emphasize, I've been in the software space. I've used software. And unless you get the person to believe in that you are providing them the best user experience and you speak their language, it's extremely hard to have traction. We know so many designers that have logins to platforms that they literally, as a badge of honor, say, I have a login, I've never done it. I've never logged in.
And that's
once.
the problem.
It's a huge problem. They're paying $12,000, $15,000 for something that they won't even touch.
No.
That speaks volumes about the solutions, about the designs. And I think a big part of that is also because it doesn't speak their language, they feel like they have not been heard, which is a turnoff for a designer. If somebody says like, hey, use this amazing pen, it's like, well, I don't use pen, I use pencil. And then you're like, no, but use the pen, it'll be fine. No, I don't use, like, they're not being heard. It pisses them off even more so.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I know we've gone through a lot of questions, and we're going to got a little bit of time here left, but I really want to make sure that I address and go through as many things as possible. So, Swatchbook really is this idea of digitization of a lot of things, and it is, according to what you were saying, is one of the best solutions currently out there on the market, right? So you guys are almost like, again, the new frontier, like the Matrix, because
that is like the Matrix.
Really, like actually, the new frontier of the fashion Matrix is Swatchbook, and that will make you guys, I guess, the blue pill. That would make you guys the blue pill. And everybody else is the red pill, but you guys are the blue pill.
Look, all we're trying to do is, the way we think about it is that any designer that's thinking about creating a product that need materials, we want them to think of us as the de facto standard of digitized materials. And I can go in there, and right now we focus on fashion, but our goals are much higher. We want any material you need to be able to find. So we work with a variety of different suppliers, brands. You name it, we want to go after it.
Lovely, amazing. So, right, I think it's very important to let everybody know about the fact that the software is free
for education.
Yes. Okay. All right, I'm gonna make sure.
For education.
Someone's going to correct me right now.
Yeah,
education.
No. So
education.
You mentioned it a bunch of times. We strongly believe in education. Any educational institute that is interested, we are more than happy to partner up and bring any student on there. We believe in that. There shouldn't be a hurdle between students learning, literally the bleeding edge of technology for their futures, and we're right there for them.
Okay.
Beyond the future, it's the brands paying for their licenses, so we're all good. It's kind of like free.
So listen, I brought this here because I'm a firm believer of magic and making dreams come true. So this is an actual thing that I can rub here and make a magical wish come true. So if Yazan and Swatchbook can magically rub this and choose somebody they would want to actually go in there and be an ambassador and actually be the person to try out their software, one person, celebrity, alive, dead.
Oh my God.
Who would you want to be if you could use this magical genie lamp, who would you wish to have utilize your stuff? I don't care if it's Drake, if it's Kanye West.
Oh my
Who
goodness.
would you love to see?
That's too much pressure, man. That's too much pressure.
The world's at your feet right now.
Look, there's two people.
Okay.
I can't. To me, they're two different people, but they might. Steve Jobs is one thing because I think he believed in products.
All right.
The way he was so hung up on products and details, and I think that people may come up as abrasive to that, but I think if you want to make something special, sometimes you need to. But we try not to be against people. It's just about the product.
Steve Jobs, number one. Give me one more.
Michael Jordan.
Well said.
Right. So again, somebody that would appreciate the finer things. And obviously there's the Jordan brand and all that. So there's a lot of things that this thing can do.